Welcome back to this Teach Out on Puerto Rico. My name is Benjamin Morse. I work here at the Office of Academic Innovation here at the University of Michigan, and I was part of the team that went to Puerto Rico to conduct a lot of interviews as part of this project. And I'm joined today by Dr. Yvette Perfecto, who's the George W. Pack Professor of Ecology, Natural Resources, and Environment in the School of for Environment and Sustainability here at the University of Michigan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of go through and ask you a few questions today, and one of the first questions that we've been asking everybody is, how did Hurricane Maria impact your work in Puerto Rico?
Well, I was there about a couple of weeks before the hurricane. I was just starting a research project. I was very excited about this project because it was, we finally got some funding to do a project in coffee farms in Puerto Rico. I've been working there for a while, but without much funding. And so this project came through, funded by USDA, and we were there beginning to plan the project and the sampling that we had to do in coffee farms in that region, in the central mountainous region of Puerto Rico. And I was basically setting up the project, and then I had to leave because classes were starting here and all that. And so I left about a week before the hurricane, and then the hurricane hit, and obviously everything changed. We could not do any sampling, of course, because first of all, there was no access. I lost contact with my team there for about a week. Couldn't contact them at all. And this was a very heavily damaged area in Utuado, the center part of the island. And eventually when I contact them, they were all fine, but they say that, access was really difficult. There was no water, no electricity, nothing. And so obviously, there's no way we could do anything related to our research project when the situation is like that. So we decided to, just basically work on helping people, trying to provide some solar lamps and filters for water, things like that. But the project got stalled for about 5 to 6 months.
Wow.
Eventually, we felt that it was okay to go to the areas and talk to the farmers and do some samplings in the farms and all that. But it took 5 months basically for us to be able to do that again.
Sure. And so on many layers, this affected you personally as well. You're from Puerto Rico.
Yes.
And you have family still living
I
in
have, my closest family is here in the States, but I still have a lot of family there, and they were all fine. But some people lost the roof of their homes. Sure. And things like that. But yeah, this was really a tragic event, a very traumatic event for many Puerto Ricans. So yeah, it really affected me because, seeing my beautiful island be devastated like that. And the problem also is that it wasn't just the hurricane, but even before the hurricane, the economic situation was very, very weak in Puerto Rico with the debt, and then a board, that's basically financial board managing the island. And so all this came, at the same time. And
are you talking about Promesa?
Yeah, Promesa. Yeah, and then the recovery that happened afterwards, or basically the delay in the recovery, the lack of help that came from the United States to some extent, in some areas, also was a consequence, I think, of that, of
Sure.
the fact that the island is in such a precarious condition in terms of financial the financial situation.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into that with one of your areas of research. So I know that you focus on agroecology and environmental and ecosystem services. So first, can you tell us what that is? And then, you were there before Hurricane Maria hit, working on that kind of stuff, and you were there after. Can you speak a little bit about how Hurricane Maria impacted?
That sure. Field? So our project is, was and to some extent still is, but it has changed a little bit, about quantifying ecosystem services, which are basically functions that ecological functions in the ecosystem that help humans. And so, for example, pollination. So how biodiversity contribute to human well-being. And one of those is through pollination, and another one is biological control, another one is carbon sequestration, and of course the provisioning services of coffee and food. And so we were going to quantify that along a gradient of intensification of the agroecosystem, of the agricultural system. So coffee, I don't know if you're familiar with how coffee is produced, but coffee can be produced in a variety of ways, from a very traditional, diverse system where you have shade trees, a lot of trees, some nitrogen-fixing trees, some fruit trees, some timber trees, and coffee is grown in the understory of those trees. And also there are some other crops that are grown in like plantains, bananas. In Puerto Rico, tubers are very common in this. Tubers is our staple, and so you can grow coffee in that very diverse system, and you can grow coffee in monocultures where the only thing is coffee, and in between anything, So there's a gradient of intensification.
Sure.
And the more diverse systems, then also not to use that many agrochemicals. The more intensive systems use agrochemicals and are monocultures and things like that. And so we were going to measure, and we are starting now to measure ecosystem services that are provided by all this range of different coffee management systems. And so, as I mentioned before, that was the intent of our project, and we had to stop that because of the hurricane. And then now, more recently, we started taking data, but the project have basically turned into a post-hurricane project recovery. So, looking at the resistance and the resilience of the coffee system along that intensification gradient. So, the hypothesis is that these very diverse systems are more resilient because the coffee is protected basically from the winds and all that because of all the other trees that are there.
Sure.
And in the coffee monoculture, the coffee is exposed completely. And so with the winds, there's a lot of damage that can be done to the actual coffee plants. Now we're in the process of testing that hypothesis. And it turns out to be a little bit more complicated. Hurricane Maria seems to have been a very strange hurricane. It caused heterogeneous damage. It covered the entire island, but with different strength in different areas, and it caused a lot of tornadoes apparently. And so actually looking at the impact of the hurricane on the coffee system, it's more complicated than we were expecting. And so we're going to have to look at that in addition to just the management system, no? And so we're in the process of doing that as well. But basically the project now is we're measuring the damage of the hurricane. We're also trying to measure the ecosystem services, what the pollination, the pest control. So we're looking at natural enemies and how they're controlling the pests and things like that.
Yeah, so as you're having conversations with farmers and other stakeholders in this area, as so many people rely on these ecosystem services for their livelihood, what other challenges are kind of presenting themselves post-Maria? I know that there's been a lot of talk about Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine, and kind of the capitalist lens of folks coming in to kind of these damaged areas post-disaster to try to take advantage of maybe low-cost land, for example.
Oh yeah,
is that something that we're seeing in Puerto Rico?
We're seeing that. Yeah, we're definitely seeing that in Puerto Rico, and in the coffee system as well. Sure. One thing that we have come to realize interviewing farmers there after the hurricane is that a lot of the farmers in the coffee system are older farmers that are, struggling basically to manage their farms. There's a problem with labor, and especially after the hurricane that has intensified because some people left the island, but also there are a lot of jobs with FEMA now. They're construction jobs and things like that pay better than the agricultural jobs. Mm-hmm. And so it's very hard to find farm workers. And so these farmers basically have to clean up their farm and put it back together on their own, and themselves and their families. And one of the things that we found is that many of them are basically trying to get some help from the government and have not been able to get it. Most of them had insurance. They haven't seen a single penny yet, especially the small-scale farmers. The large-scale farmers have received some insurance money, but the small-scale farmers, the ones that have 1, 2, 3, 5 acres, haven't seen any money yet.
Why do you think that is?
I think that with the insurance, you have to be there, you have to keep pushing and all that, and they don't have the resources, Many of these farmers are resource-poor farmers. They don't have a lot of money. They live from year to year on their coffee harvest. So one of the things that we notice is that the farmers and this is related to the resilience that I was talking about before, how fast the farms recover, is not just an ecological process, but it's also a social, economic, and political process. So the farmers that have the resources, whether it's monetary or a support system, they can get back to their farm, clean it up right after the hurricane. They could do that. But a lot of the farmers were not able to do that. And so what happens is that the weeds basically take over, especially the vines. And so we have seen farms that are completely covered with vines. And when we talk to the farmer, they look at their farm with tears in their eyes because they see, the beautiful farm that they had before, and then they look at what they have now, and they feel, that they're losing their farm. And basically because some of them had to leave where they were living because of the vulnerability, and all that. And they come back. After a while, they don't have they're just trying to secure food and water, et cetera. Meanwhile, the weeds are growing. The vines are taking over. And they don't have the time or the resources, the labor to be, the money to pay somebody to clean the farm. And basically the farm is taken over by the weeds.
Wow.
And the farmers that do have the resources, and you see a big difference in terms of how the farms look like now, 10, 12 months or 10 months after the hurricane, you see that some farms are doing well, are recovering, and other farms are in terrible conditions. And that has to do partially to the ecology of the system, the management before the hurricane and all that, but partially to the economic system and how many resources the farmers had to put into their farms to recover them.
Sure. Yeah.
And one thing that is happening related to that, you asked me about the shock doctrine, is that some farmers are selling their land. And Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola company, long time ago actually, this happened way before, they started buying Puerto Rican brands. And so there are some Puerto Rican brands that have, you know, very high recognition among the public, and they bought those brands, and they began importing coffee from Mexico and other countries. And so when you see Puerto Rican coffee, the main brands that used to be the darlings of the Puerto Rican people, they're not, you know, they contain very little percentage of Puerto Rican coffee. And Coca-Cola is beginning to buy land from these farmers. And so I think that is really a critical moment now for coffee, because coffee has been a very important crop economically for Puerto Rico. No, and throughout the years it have been going down because there doesn't seem to be a lot of support for agriculture in general, not just coffee, but agriculture in general. And so Coca-Cola is taking advantage of that, no, and basically taking over coffee production and distribution and processing in Puerto Rico.
Sure. And I know another one of the challenges that a lot of folks, both in the urban and rural areas, are facing is the access to energy and electricity, right? We know that the days after the hurricane, it was basically a wipeout completely. And we know that it took a really long time to get a lot of the system back online. Our colleagues at Notre Dame chatted with a few folks that were really looking into community-based solar and alternatives to kind of the crumbling power grid that Puerto Rico has. And I know one of your initial or your most recent initiatives in Puerto Rico is working with Casa Puebla and in a partnership with the Graham Sustainability Institute here at University of Michigan. Can you tell me a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, sure. This is a project that we developed after the hurricane in response basically to the hurricane. I have been collaborating with Casa Pueblo for a long time. Casa Pueblo is a community organization with a 38 years experience. Wow. They started opposing open pit mines in the central mountainous region of Puerto Rico, and were successful in that campaign. They prevented that and converted that area, the area that was supposed to be mined, into the Bosque del Pueblo, which is a forest for the people. And since then, they have been working with the community in that region, basically in education projects and projects that are for sustainable development of the region. And since the 90s, they've been involved in renewable energy efforts. Their casa, their house in Adjuntas, is a community house, is all run on solar power. And it's been like that. It's been like that for many years. And so one of their main campaign is to promote alternative energies in Puerto Rico and renewable energy. And so we contacted them after the hurricane and found out that they are developing more, trying to promote more solar panels, installation of solar panels in Adjuntas. And in particular, they had a community where a lot of people, because of medical conditions, needed to have electricity, like running dialysis machines and things like that. And they installed solar panels there. So in conversations with my colleagues here in Michigan, John Vandermeer and Jose Alfaro, who has been working on this issue. Jose is an engineer and has been working on these issues of alternative energy, renewable energy, and hybrid systems for a while. So we got together and wrote a proposal in combination with Casa Pueblo and also with Boricua, which is an organization of organic farmers, agroecological farmers in Puerto Rico. And the idea is to combine the energy sector and the agricultural sector. I'm an agroecologist, so I'm always interested in the agricultural sector. Right. And then we thought that we could basically work with Casa Pueblo in developing hybrid systems. And the idea is to install gasifiers. Basically, these are machines that will turn biomass into syngas, which is basically hydrogen gas that could then be connected with the electric system, the solar system, in forming a hybrid system. No, and the idea is that if you have solar panels, you generate solar energy during the day, but then you have to store that energy so that you can have energy at night. And the storage is usually the most expensive part of solar energy. And so with the gasifier, you could generate energy that you can use at night. And with these hybrid systems, then you can have you can reduce the need for a big storage of energy. And so Casa Pueblo was very excited about this idea, and we organized a master's project from SEAS, the School for Environment and Sustainability. And this summer, 6 students went to Puerto Rico, developed, constructed a gasifier, artisanal gasifier. The idea is to find out whether this is possible to do with materials in Puerto Rico. They run into some challenges, but they were able to construct a gasifier that not only produce syngas, which is for energy, but the other component of the gasification process is that the waste, the so-called waste, is not waste, but is a carbon, what is called biochar. And biochar is very, very good for soils, for enhancing the qualities of agricultural soils. So the idea here, and that's where the combination of agriculture and energy comes in, the idea is then to use that biochar and apply the biochar to the soils in agricultural areas to be able to enhance the soil quality. And so we're doing some studies as well. So part of the master's project is to also study the effect that biochar has on the quality of the soil and how it enhances production of agricultural products.
Sounds like an amazing project.
Yeah.
Very closed loop in a lot of ways, right? And,
exactly.
and using the energy and the resiliency of both the natural environment and the people on the ground to make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Yvette.
Sure.
And thank you for joining us for this segment in the Teach Out. And we want to encourage you to continue to jump into the discussion forums and answer a lot of the discussion questions that we're putting up. And we look forward to seeing you in the next segment.